our agenda for the day is to basically go through the process of applying to UCDC, how to find an internship, eligibility and costs, things like that. We'll have a section at the end for Q&A, but we're going to go ahead and start with introductions. My name is Erica Kirk. I am the academic advisor for the Department of Urban Studies and Planning. We now have 2 advisors. I'll go ahead and let Jennifer Eller introduce herself and explain what she does for our department.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Eller, and I recently joined the USP department as the Industry Liaison Coordinator. So my job is to connect students, faculty, and industry in win-win partnerships, and also provide students with career and internship counseling.
And then I'll pass it to Mackenzie from AIP to talk about her position.
Hi everyone, my name is Mackenzie Richardson, and I am an AIP and UCDC peer advisor with the UCDC program at UCSD. I'm currently a graduate student here at UCSD, and I finished my undergrad earlier this year when I did the UCDC program myself in 2019. So I too am still a student, but I love this program, and I love encouraging students from all majors to apply to have this opportunity to do a quarter in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about planning for UCDC. This is what an overview of the path to DC could look like, or will look like. You're currently at the first step, planning. Next would be preparing an application to apply to UCDC, and then going through the selection process and securing internships with a DC organization. Throughout the whole process, the UCDC team is there to help you apply to the program and search for internships and work. They also go over, they also work with you on your resume and cover letter. When you're applying for internships, you'll be working with the UCDC team and the UC Washington Center on your internship search as well. However, it's ultimately the student's responsibility to secure their own internship. This kind of mirrors in our department how the internship process works for the senior sequence. So we have tons of resources and support, but students have the responsibility of finding and securing their internship themselves. We highly suggest that you begin looking and applying for internships before you apply to the UCDC program. I really strongly recommend this, especially if you're interested in a very specific field. A lot of students in urban studies and planning have a more narrow interest than the broad field of planning. And so if your interests are like in affordable housing, knowing what's available in DC around affordable housing, whether that's policy, nonprofit work, makes the application process overall a lot smoother. So I always recommend that. Specific things to consider for USP, in addition to knowing kind of what internships you might be looking for. This internship is separate from the senior sequence internship. So every USP major completes a 100-hour internship in conjunction with USP 186 and 187. That has to happen in the fall and winter that you're doing the senior sequence. So an internship done through UCDC doesn't also count for that. It would be something separate. But what many USP students do is they do UCDC in their junior year. That's actually probably the best year to do it for our majors. And then they use it as a jumping off point for planning their senior research project in USP 186 or 187. And some students will use it as a comparative point for their project in USP 186 and 187. So taking the affordable housing example, a student may do like an affordable housing policy related internship through UCDC. And then when they come back and do their senior research project in the fall, they might work both with their internship site that they were at in DC and their internship site that they're at in San Diego to compare affordable housing policy in both places as part of their senior research project. Seminar courses taken through UCDC are USP 194. It's 4 units. It can be taken for a letter grade or pass no pass. The courses that are related to USP can count as an upper division elective. If students are using them for an upper division elective, they just have to be taken for a letter grade. And before you go, you can always check in with the advisors in the Urban Studies and Planning Department to make sure that a course will count for credit. Courses are subject to change each quarter. It's up to each student to check in and make sure that the courses will count. When you're planning for UCDC, there are several things that you might want to consider that courses will count. When you're planning for UCDC, there are several things that you might want to consider. The what do you want to pursue is super important. For example, if you're interested in UCDC, it makes sense that you're here right now. But there are other opportunities that you may want to consider too, especially if you want to do multiple opportunities. Planning them out, what happens best in what quarters in which years is super important. So things like study abroad, UC Center Sacramento, research opportunities, volunteer opportunities, jobs you may have on or off campus, figuring out how they all work together, what your top priorities are and what you want to pursue is super important. The other thing that's really important is why do you want to pursue this particular opportunity? So for UCDC, you might want to think about how UCDC helps you on your academic journey, pursue future career interests, help build out your skill set, and just like what your general goals are for participating in the program. The question is part of the application process, and so thinking through that a little bit will help you complete your application materials when you're at that step. The other big part of planning for UCDC is the when. UCDC program deadlines are usually 2 quarters in advance. So you'll get college department and program advisors to help you plan. If a student wants, you may want to think about some of the things listed on the screen when you're deciding when to go to UCDC. So for USP, I mentioned that the junior year is typically the best time to go. One, it helps kind of gear you up for the senior sequence when you come back in your senior year. But also it gives you the most level of flexibility with our curriculum when you go to UCDC. You've hit the 90 units for the program and you can fit it around your USP classwork pretty easily in the junior year. The senior year is a little bit harder with the senior sequence, and so junior year tends to work best for USP majors. But there are other things you might want to consider, right? Depending on where you are in your curriculum, the things like which quarter to go might depend on whether you've taken like your foundation courses or your research methods classes for your major, or if you have specific coursework for a minor or a double major that you need to take in specific quarters. Thinking through that is super important. If you're interested in going to grad school right away, I would also recommend going in your junior year to UCDC. It makes it a little bit easier to get UCDC on, it's to complete UCDC before you do your application materials for grad school. And then you can build connections for things like letters of rec and have everything in place by the time you do your grad school apps in your senior year. How does UCDC count towards the major? Well, the course that counts for USP majors is USP 194. It can count as an upper division elective, and depending on the course material in the USP 194 that you choose to take, it can also count as a research methods or a technical elective by petition. Just generally though, it counts as an upper division elective for the major. The other ways to get credit for UCDC are the internship seminar course, which is AIP 197. This can be taken for different unit options, 6, 8, or 10 units, depending. There's also an optional course, which is required only if you're enrolled in the 10 units with the courses above, and that's EXPR 100, which is an elective course for 4 units. An important thing to note about academic credit is that there isn't an academic component attached to UCDC in the summer, but you can still enroll in the AIP 197. So the USP 184 isn't an option in the summer, so you wouldn't get that elective credit for USP. But during any academic quarter, you do get the credit for USP 194. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Mackenzie, who's going to talk a little bit more about the internship process and talk a little bit about some internships that our students have done in the past.
Yeah, thanks so much, Erica. And then one more note on summer is just that if you want to do UCDC, but say maybe you're a junior now just hearing about this opportunity, and so there's not really a great way to fit it into your 4-year plan, you could still choose to do the summer option, and you would just be doing an internship for just the general internship credit that we saw on the previous slide. So that is an option that you could think about, which I think is a good one for any seniors who maybe want to get a little bit more internship experience before they jump into a career right away, the working world. So if you are interested in learning more about summer, I would recommend that you come directly to UCDC and come talk to us about it so we can help explain how it works, because it is a little bit different, as we've mentioned, from academic quarters. So we're going to jump into the actual looking for internships portion, which obviously is the main draw to the UCDC program. So featured here in this picture are some UCDC interns in DC standing in front of actually the place where I worked, which was the Woodrow Wilson Center. It's this big foreign policy international think tank, which is partly funded by Congress and then partly funded by the American public to do international research on a huge variety of topics. And so while I was there, I was actually a media intern, which I always like to use as an opportunity of how you can be doing an internship that is related to your interests at an organization that is not, or vice versa, which was kind of my path. I wasn't necessarily super interested in media, but I was interested in kind of learning more about foreign policy. So I just found a position that would allow me to work at that organization. So that's just kind of what I did when I was searching for internships. So thinking about your areas of interest, especially related to USP, you really want to be thinking back on the classes that you've taken, especially if you haven't had an internship before, maybe you haven't had a job related to your field of interest yet. So thinking about your time at UCSD, maybe thinking about any student organizations that you've been a part of, maybe thinking about professors that you have taken the class with where they talk to you about some research they're doing that you thought was really interesting. All these things will help you cultivate potential interests to keep in mind as you start your internship search. And the other thing you can do while you're thinking about that is also ask around, ask those professors questions about their research, or ask them about things that you're interested in that you want to bring up to them. You can also ask family members who are maybe working somewhere that you think is interesting, or maybe they previously were employed somewhere you thought was interesting. And you can also ask supervisors, whether that's at work, whether maybe that's a advisor for a club, or someone close to you that maybe has some kind of relation to something that you're interested in. And so then after that, you can also go meet people, especially during the pandemic. You can always cold email people. If you're searching around at organizations and you find someone who is doing something that you're interested in, you want to ask more about it, that's always a great way to find out more about potential internships that do something similar. You can also use a variety of websites to help you look up potential careers. So you can use the resources we have listed on the UCDC site. You could also use things like Indeed, Glassdoor, Handshake, etc. And you could also use career services at UCSD, which is really, really fabulous. They know lots and are really great at helping to get you started. So by doing all these things, it'll help you expand your current knowledge base and find new topics that are exciting to you. And then once you've settled on some topics, then you can really start to do a deep dive on an internship search. And the UCDC staff is here to help you during that entire process. And actually, once you're admitted to the UCDC program, one of the things we do is a mandatory resume and cover letter review so that we can help you get set up to apply to all those internships. At the same time, if you're feeling a little bit stuck in the internship search process, we will also happily offer some counseling to help you get unstuck. So some questions to ask yourself and for me to help provide some answers for right now is, firstly, how soon to begin applying to internships in DC? So like Erica said on the previous slide, you can apply before you apply to the UCDC program, and we recommend it. especially for any really competitive internships. It's always a good idea to look earlier than you need to, just to be aware of deadlines and application materials that you'll be required to submit, especially if you need more than 2 letters of rec. The UCDC application is purposely set up to help you apply to internships by forcing you to provide things like a resume, cover letter, 2 letters of rec, etc. But some internships might require more than that. So that's why I recommend at least looking earlier than you apply to the UCDC program. And so then the next question is, how many internships should you apply to? It depends on the quarter you're going. So going back to the summer program, one of the reasons it does have a little bit different rules is because summer is an incredibly competitive quarter. And so we normally recommend that students apply to 40+ internships. But for a regular academic year, we usually say about 20 to 30 is a good number. Then the next question is, can you have a paid internship? The answer is yes, absolutely. If you're an international student, you should go ahead and check with the International Student Office just to make sure that you are good to go. Also, of course, to make sure that when you're applying to internships, you're checking for those eligibility requirements, such as visa, or certain internships like working for the federal government sometimes require you to be a US citizen. So those are all really good things, again, to check up on when you're doing that initial internship survey and just seeing what's out there. But generally, yes, if you can get paid, we highly encourage that you get paid at your internship that you're applying to. And then again, where can you begin looking? I think the UCDC website is a really great place to start. And then once you kind of get acquainted with some of the tools and resources we've put on our website, then you can expand to other ones, especially any resources that faculty, supervisors, family members, friends give you. And then lastly, if you are maybe, again, newer in your internship process, or you haven't had an internship before, or maybe you're like me and you changed your major. I changed my major my 3rd year of college and felt that I had 0 relevant experience in my particular major at the time. It will not hinder your internship search. I always recommend that students fall back on transferable skills. That can come from classes, student organizations and clubs, things that you did before you came to UCSD. And again, if you are struggling to find internships that you think that you're qualified to apply for, please come see us and we are so happy to help you out. And again, Career Services is also a really wonderful place to go to, and they will help you find those transferable skills for those internships. And then lastly, we usually get the question of internship start and end dates, because once you do start your internship search, you'll notice that a lot of the internship start and end dates align with the semester system rather than the quarter system. However, most organizations in DC are familiar with the quarter system, especially with the UC system. So we always tell students, go ahead and apply for those, and then in your cover letter, or if there's a place to say anything extra on the application, just go ahead and say that you're a quarter student. And so your start and end dates will align with the start and end dates of that particular UCDC quarter, which most of the time the UCDC quarter ends the last week, usually week 10, so the week before finals, which is always nice because then usually UCDC students return from DC when all of their UCSD counterparts are about to do finals week, and you get an extra little week of break, which is great. So moving on to some potential internships. So some organization types that you could work at are, of course, Capitol Hill with Congress and the White House. So the 2 places you could work at Capitol Hill are the House of Representatives and the US Senate. And within those, you could either work for a congressional member. So that would be like your local congressman or a congressman from another state and district, or you could even work for a committee, which is a really great place to get some different experience. The other place you could work at is the US Department. So that could be Department of Interior, Department of State. There are a ton of departments. I just tried to think of more and I thought of too many at once. So all of those, you can usually use websites such as USA Jobs to go search for those kinds of opportunities. You can also, again, work for nonprofits. Nonprofits are awesome. And when I was running some diagnostics on our last 4 years of UCDC participants, nearly half of them worked at nonprofits in DC. And that's partially due to so many of those large organizations that we all think of right away are actually registered as 501c3 organizations, which is a nonprofit, even if they might outwardly say that they're something like a think tank, which is really cool. Another thing you could do is a law firm if you wanted to get some law experience, or you found a position that is really interesting to you, that's maybe working with attorneys. And again, you could work at a think tank, which they usually cover a really wide range of policies. You could also work at news media or private business. So opportunities abound in all these different organization types. So some examples of organizations that USP students had interned at before are the Office of Bernie Sanders and Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Dianne Feinstein. So that goes back to Capitol Hill. I think it's a nonprofit downtown DC. The Urban Institute, the Brookings Institution, which is a think tank. It's a very prestigious, really awesome think tank, so kudos to that person. Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and the Smith Group. So these are all really cool places to intern. I'd like to point out the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. They do a lot of really awesome work related to housing and poverty and infrastructure. So that could be a really cool place to check out. And then if you are not really sure still, maybe the differences between these types of organizations, I created a fun internship quiz, which is also on our website, where it's kind of like BuzzFeed style, where you answer some questions about yourself, and it shows maybe what types of internships could be a good fit for you. So that's kind of a fun way to just explore some more of these internship types. It also will give you a list when you click on each type of organization, a list of internships that UCDC students have interned at before, just again to give you some ideas. So I have 2 internship examples of UCDC alumni, and I just took some quick clips from their testimonials. So this first person worked at the Local Initiative Support Corporation, and they were partnered with a local nonprofit called Mi Casa, which is an affordable housing developer. And so something I thought that they were able to do there during their internship, which was really cool, was they helped design, coordinate, and execute demographic data analysis report for 8 buildings owned by their nonprofit. And then they also got to work with this really diverse team of people from all these different countries working together. And they were able to kind of develop their economic information database for themselves by attending all these different seminars and interacting with these public policy directors and officers. So that's just a really good example of how much this person learned at their internship. And so that's the student pictured with their coworkers. And so the second person kind of went a slightly different path. They were more interested in interning with Congress. So this person actually interned twice during UCDC, once in 2017 and then in 2019, both times within Congress. So specifically, I'm focusing on their second round at UCDC, which was in spring of 2019 with the Office of Senator Dianne Feinstein. And so with their congressional internship, they were able to attend all these different Senate hearings on improving America's infrastructure, and they were able to propose a policy to the senator's staff, which is really neat. And that was regarding electric vehicle charging nations across America. And so this person points out at the end as well, their supervisor was really flexible in allowing them to network and find a job. And so this person is actually currently working on Capitol Hill full-time now after graduating. So 2 different internship examples, students with slightly different interests and kind of went 2 different paths. And either way, UCDC was just able to allow them to explore different career options and grow their network in order to help them figure out what they wanted to do with a career. And so this is the picture of the second student during inauguration day, actually, this year. So then lastly, I want to go over the UCDC application. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit inspired and hopefully want to apply to the program. And so firstly, for people attending this workshop, we are hoping to hear back soon about the status of fall 2021 and then in the next coming months, winter 2021, whether or not UCDC will be in person or not. So those updates will be on the official UCDC website as they come out. So if you're interested in, if, for example, if you're a sophomore this year and you're thinking about applying to UCDC this coming year, I recommend that you bookmark the official UCDC website for those updates. So first off, eligibility for UCDC. All majors are welcome to apply. We do not discriminate against any majors. It's not just for poli-sci students. But we do require that you be in upper division standing, which means you've completed at least 90 units and you've taken at least 2 upper division courses by the time you go to UCDC. So you can actually apply as a sophomore as long as you will have those completed by the quarter that you go. Secondly, we do ask that you have at least a 2.5 GPA. It says 3.0 preferred. We absolutely understand when things happen. And so if there is an extraneous circumstance, you can always explain things to us during the application process. For example, I changed my major in my 3rd year. So, you know, you can never say never. And then lastly, US citizenship is not required for the UCDC application. So we happily accept international students and DACA undocumented students. And then if you are a student without US citizenship seeking to apply, you can go to the FAQs just to get more information. But again, you do not have to be a US citizen to apply to UCDC. So how to apply? Again, our application is set up in a way that will allow you to easily apply to internships by having most of the required materials. So the first thing that you'll need to do is fill out an application form that just has general information about yourself. And then after that, we require a resume, a cover letter or letter of intent, and the difference between those can be found on our website, and then 2 letters of recommendation. And so with the letters of recommendation, we recommend that one of those is from a faculty member, but it's not required. So if you'd like to submit 2 that are from work supervisors or people that are not affiliated with university, that's fine. The benefit of having a letter of recommendation written by a faculty member is that they are able to attest to your scholastic abilities. So next, circling back to earning academic credit. So one thing to note is that during UCDC, you are living, working, and taking classes in DC for 1 academic quarter for 10 weeks. And the entire time that you're there, you are considered a full-time UC student through UCSD. And the way that that works is that you will be taking your research seminar class, which is USP 194 for 4 units. And then you will also be taking AIP 197 DC, which gives you a minimum of 6 units for completing that internship. And so this way, in total, you have a minimum of 12 units, which keeps you in full-time status. And so we'll kind of come back to that on the next slide and kind of how that refers back to financial aid. So I think that's a huge benefit of the program and something really important to keep in mind as you're planning everything out. It's also important to, recognize that that AIP 197 DC credit is upper division general credit. And so if you happen to be doing a minor and you're a little bit nervous about having too many units, because that was something that kind of happened to me, I recommend that you just take that as a factor in your planning process. And going back again to summer, there is no required academic component. So you can go do the UCDC program over the summer and not have any kind of credit involved, which is again why I want to bring that up. But again, if you're interested in summer, please come talk to us. So going back to costs, tuition and registration fees are nearly the same as a quarter at UCSD. while you're doing the UCDC program. The main difference is the price of residential housing. DC's housing costs a little bit higher. We have our own private building in Washington, DC, about 2 blocks from the White House. You're a 10-minute walk, and I passed it every day on my way to work, which is really cool. But generally speaking, you can factor that the prices are very, very similar to a quarter of living on campus. And we actually do have a cost breakdown on the UCSD UCDC website for students to view so that you can kind of get a feel for how much a quarter costs. And that's the UCDC estimated budget. The other thing that you should factor in while you're planning for UCDC is the cost of various other items that students are responsible for paying for. And so those things are round trip airfare, so that's your plane ticket there and back, local transportation costs, so that could be Uber, that could be if you wanted to take a train to do a trip to New York City or Philadelphia, which also covers the sightseeing activities. And as well as professional clothing and seasonal clothing. That's something that I think a lot of students don't think about to the last minute. So if you want to get a new blazer, a new pair of dress slacks, that's something that you'll have to pay for yourself, as well as if you are going in winter, such as that's what I did, and you don't have a good winter coat because you're used to living in San Diego for a hot minute, which is what happened to me, then you will need to factor that into your budget, maybe to pay for a good winter coat. And so again, summer is a little bit different, which again, come talk to us if you're interested in summer, broken record. So if you're not taking any units, you're not doing the financial component over the summer, then students would only need to pay housing costs and the items that I just said that students are responsible for. So kind of going over to scholarships and then also financial aid. So there are scholarships available to students. So one of those is the UC Office of the President Presidential Fellowship, which is usually offered during academic quarters. It's between $1,500 and $2,000. It does change year to year, and its availability does vary. So that's always a good one to keep an eye out for and look up. Typically, when students apply to UCDC, they will also apply to the UC Office of the Presidential Fellowship. We also have some scholarships through the academic internship program awarded based on financial need and usually academic performance. And so similarly, they're on a rolling basis. They do vary from quarter to quarter whether or not they're available. So if you're interested, you can always talk to us and we can let you know what's going on with the AIP scholarships. Very important, since you are a full-time student while you're doing the UCDC program, all of your financial aid applies to the quarter that you participate in UCDC. So for example, with my financial aid, I had tuition coverage. And so when I went to DC, that tuition coverage followed me and I only paid for housing. So I think that's a huge benefit to this program as well, since you are a UC student the entire time you're there. So if you have questions about how your financial aid might apply, especially if your financial aid might increase since the cost of living increases slightly at UCDC, we recommend that you go to the financial aid office to discuss any adjustments and then also to plan for the future. So some upcoming deadlines, our fall priority deadline just passed this past week for fall 2021, but there will be a final deadline coming out probably around May. So if you are attending this workshop or watching this recording and you are interested in going in the fall, I recommend that you go to our website, you look up the application and go ahead and fill everything out and submit so that we can review your application and include it in consideration for fall 2021. And then our winter 2022 program priority application deadline is May 7th. And then we will have another final deadline sometime over the summer, or sometimes it's rolling until filled. This year is a bit unprecedented, so not sure which one it'll be. So if you're interested in winter, it'll probably be over the summer. And then this is far in advance, but again, since this is a planning workshop, I just want to put it on everyone's radar. Our spring 2022 priority deadline will probably be sometime in early fall. So if you're interested in maybe going in the spring next year, just keep an eye open towards the start of fall quarter for that priority deadline. And then just a quick note on just the difference between priority and final. If you apply by the priority deadline, you have a higher chance of getting accepted into the program, and you are notified earlier of acceptance, which can help with getting a head start on internship searches. But again, you have until the final deadline. We normally have spots open between the priority deadline closing and then the final deadline closing. So if you really, really want to go to UCDC for a particular quarter, I highly recommend you apply by the priority. But if you are taking a little bit longer to get your application materials ready, or you're trying to decide if you want to do UCDC during a certain quarter, then feel free to wait until the final deadline. So just a quick note on that. And so this kind of brings us to the end of the presentation, but we're going to open it into Q&A. Just to leave you guys with some contact information, the UCDC program and the academic internship program does peer advising drop-in hours on Tuesdays from 1:30 to 3 o'clock Pacific time in the afternoon. So you can drop into those hours to ask any questions, get more information if you want clarity on something, or if you have any questions, of course, about the application process, we're more than happy to go over that with you. You can also schedule an appointment to either meet with Jennifer, who is the UCDC program coordinator, or meet with someone like myself, who's a peer advisor, someone who's done the program and is still currently a student through our other You Can Book Me links. So both of these links are available on this slide, which will be sent out to everybody, but also available on our website on the homepage. And then for urban studies and planning majors, you can connect with people like Erica through the virtual advising center so that you can get some specific major and department advice.